So now this step in the process, we need to go through and take our stream or our buffer and send that buffer data along with the product ID to our inventory utility. So I'm going to utilize Visual Studio to do some refactoring functionality to help speed along the process of doing this work. So what we need is a few things. We will need to actually get an instance of our inventory utility, and I will use my dependency injector to get that. And then I'm going to say invUtil.update product picture. Now this is a function that doesn't exist, but what I'm doing is I'm using the refactor functionality within Visual Studio to help me write this code. So what Visual Studio will ultimately do is I'm going to write this as if this function existed. And then I'm going to tell Visual Studio to create a function within my iInventory utility that matches what I just wrote. So if we notice here, it gives me a red squiggle and a red arrow. I can drop down and it says generate method. So I'm going to go ahead and choose generate the method, and you'll notice here it gives me a preview, and inside the preview it says it'll return void update product picture, which is the name, and then it actually has their ID and buffer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit generate. So that navigates us to void update product picture within our interface. It's an int ID, and then our byte array, that's our buffer. I'm going to change this to be product ID, and that's really just for clarity on my part. I just wanted to make sure that I know that I'm expecting the product ID to be passed in here. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now with just these two changes, we're not getting any errors here within our form, but we don't actually have an implementation of this new method for our DB inventory utility. So if I jump back here, we'll see we've got some red squiggles going on, and that's because we don't have an implementation for that new method. So from here we can implement the interface, and that will add that method name down here to the bottom. So there's update product picture. So then here's where we do our work of updating the picture. Now this update process is very similar to update product that we have here above. So I'm going to actually start by copying this code and pasting it into update product picture. Since you'll see that it's about probably 80 to 90% the same, it's easier for me to do that and then not run the risk of trying to rewrite the function and then ultimately breaking something that exists. Alright, so we will start out by getting our SQL command like we did before. We're going to be doing an update to the products table, but what we'll be setting an update to is going to be two properties. So what we're going to do here is update products, set, and we're going to set the picture, which is the name of the property or the name of the field in the database. So we're going to set picture equal to @picture. We do not need to modify the UPC code, the description, or the unit price, but we will update last modified, and then we'll say where the ID equals ID. Alright, so coming further down, we have a last modified date that we're capturing. And then we have all these parameters that we're adding. The only ones that we actually will need will be the ID, which we're going to reference as product ID. It's coming out of the parameter that's coming in. And then I'm going to delete all of these except for name, and we'll replace that with the buffer. And then we also need to update that to not be @name, but @picture. Alright, so that piece is in place. So essentially what we're doing is we're passing our buffer in to this picture parameter, passing the product ID in as the ID parameter, and then we're updating the date time with last modified. And what this will do is it'll update the photo in the database for us. So same work as before. We open up our connection, we execute our query, we close our connection, and then the last piece here is that we actually don't need to update product to update because we're not passing in that object in the first place. So that'll take care of all of that work for us. So product to update, or update product picture, is now current. So let's go ahead and do a quick build and make sure everything is functioning. Oh, and our static inventory utility does not implement our interface, because if you remember in this project we have two inventory utilities. So to get around that, I'm simply going to say implement interface, and that will add another one of these not implemented exception or one of these methods, update product picture, and it'll throw a not implemented exception. We're not currently using this utility in our project, so it's not really a big deal for us, but keeping that current, and if we were doing multiple implementations, we would need to make sure that we're writing implementations for both our database and then maybe a web service or some other sort of utility. So let's do a build one more time. And our build is successful. So we now have all of those pieces in place to be able to actually update the photo in our database, which we'll do in our next video.